Hello again. I have said it before. Necessity is the author of creativity. And if you could ever see it behind the camera, you'd understand. I don't have a tripod. I am doing my digital nomad life, so I am not in one place for more than a few days, maybe 7 days maximum on average. And so I am literally lugging everything that I own with me. And because YouTube did not factor in on this particular stage of life I never knew I needed a tripod. Mark it. We've had several in the past. Not we, my son. I'm very inclusive. I always say we. You get used to it. Yeah. Never had a tripod. Never thought I needed one. And in my impulse, and that is another thing that I have learned about me. I can be very sorry, forgive me. I just had breakfast and I'm seeing this little thing on the side of the plate that looked like a worm. And I'm like, oh my God, not really. But I'm wondering what it was. So, being me, I just couldn't sit here and have something over the side of the plate. So, I had to make sure that it was just a piece of cabbage. So, now I know that it's not a worm. I can get back to what I have been doing, what I've had planned. I've had so much planned to share here with you, my subscribers, my future subscribers, my friends. And so today I have a nice little background. Can you see it? Fishes on the water. And we are in a new location in Playa del Carmen. Nice little apartment. I did not do an apartment tour when we arrived because I was so ruffled. Who knows? Maybe in a video I'll make comment on what happened, but I was so ruffled and I was actually doubtful about what this particular place would be. It was booked last minute. I think it was booked just the same day that we departed the Tapestry by Hilton in Playa del Carmen, and we still had a few more days before it was time to leave Mexico. Yeah, we're leaving Mexico. Can you believe it? I don't want to go. I'm not ready to go. I tell you. But anyway, I always told my clients when I worked in the hotel industry, when they kept saying they don't want to go, they're not ready to go, some of them were crying. I always said to them, well, if you leave, that will give you an opportunity to return. And somehow it seemed to make sense to them and they would sober up. And some of them, you know, would come back. It's so funny as I'm talking about that. Some of them would hide from the bus driver, and we would have to run all over the hotel trying to find them. Their bags were outside, ready to be loaded, and they were missing in action. They were so happy to get away from their lives, and living in the Caribbean, working in hospitality. I really couldn't quite understand the magnitude of what they were going through until now. So, my throat seems to be doing its own thing. But hey, welcome to Life In. So, yes, I have a few things that I want to be speaking about during the next few videos. And it's probably going to be a series. And I could entitle it, Why Did I? Because everything from here onwards, not necessarily in order, but my intention is to do a Why Did I video to speak on why I did a few things that I did. This first one, it has taken me a few years to really, really talk about it. And yes, just in case some of you are wondering about the head tie, the head wrap, it's today that I need to go to the barber. Yep, gonna get my nice lady cut and forget all the hair shaming sentiments that I've been sharing with myself, because for the next level of the adventure, My hair cannot look like Scary Gonzalez. Whomever Scary Gonzalez is, I just made him up. Anyway, don't want you to think I'm rambling. I can't figure out what happened to my throat. It wasn't like that before. I had pernil. I think it's called pernil. I had this interesting sandwich with jamon serrano. That's what it was. Jamon serrano with cheese and onions on a pretzel looking bread, but it's not pretzel. I guess it's very Mexican. But it had an aftertaste that is somewhat tickling my throat. So it's kind of giving me a bit of a discomfort, and I think it's even causing film to well up in my throat. Anyway, let's get to the topic on the table. Why did I leave my marriage? Yep, why did I leave my marriage? Okay, where should I start? I think this is going to be a long video. Or maybe not. Who knows? Maybe halfway through I'll just get tired and not bother. This is probably one of the hardest topics I have had to speak on. It's not one that I readily speak on because I'm still going through the healing, but I will give you some talking points and we'll see where it takes us. And as a good therapist would say, I think a good therapist would say it. I've never been to one, but I did study to be a psychologist. That's a story for another day. When I feel uncomfortable or unable to say anymore, I will just stop. So, yeah. So I could start with when I got married. Yeah, that's a good idea. I got married the 7th of December, 1996. I had the wedding that I had envisioned in a little country church by the side of the road. Literally, it was a vision I had had. And then I drove past this church that I'd never seen before on my way to Port Maria shortly after I moved for a job in the parish of St. Mary. And Jamaica has parishes, some places has states. Jamaica has parishes. So me, the Kingstonian girl, Kingston is the capital of Jamaica, left Kingston because of work, went to Negril, worked in Negril, had a very life-altering experience. We probably will talk about that at some point. And I was transferred to a sister property in the parish of St. Mary. So, got to St. Mary and lived on property, but at a point I realized that I was working too hard. I was at everybody's beck and call. I lived on property. I was the resident translator. I was a resident guest service assistant. I was the resident sales coordinator without a title nor a salary. I was a resident do anything that needs to be done at any time girl, which eventually became so bad that I would be called out of my sleep at 2 a.m. if there was a Spanish speaking client checking in. So I left that job and I moved off property, and now I needed furnishings and stuff for the kitchen and everything. It was an empty apartment. So yeah, drove past this beautiful rustic church on the side of the road, and it stuck in my mind. I did not see at the time that that's the church I've been married in, but I kept that memory. And I had recommitted my walk with the Lord. I was desperately looking for somewhere to worship, and my mind kept pulling me to that church. So eventually, I got a Sunday off, and I decided I'm going to church. I had not been to church since March, and this was June. So I went out of my way and tried to figure out how to go to the church. It was by the side of the road, one straight road from where I lived at the time in Boscobel to where the church was located. So that's easy enough. Good. Got to the church. I will not even, okay, I might as well. Saw a musician, because I know you like a good story, right? The story might be a part two to be continued. My God, I'm already at 10 minutes and the story has not started as to why I left the marriage. My goodness. Anyway, so went into the church and it was just sheer worship, for me. And the Lord really was dealing with me, and I worshiped and I recommitted my walk, my mind, my life to His will and His calling. And at the end of the service, there was a welcome from persons who had seen me come in. And I guess I looked a little bit weird because I was well dressed. At that time, I was Miss Fashion Conscious. No. I guess 20s plus 50s, totally different lifespan, especially when the clothes don't fit the way they used to and you get very frustrated and all of that jazz. So anyway, I was looking good, but more than that, I was in a state of worship and I cried all through the service. And I guess that must have been very, very unsettling for the persons who were from the church. So this musician came over to me, introduced himself, welcomed me, very nice, very warm. And at the end of service, I met up on a few other people. There was a young lady who stopped by and said, it was Men's Sunday. Yes, it was Men's Sunday in June. And they were dining at the church. So I was invited to remain and dine with them. And then just kind of hang out. They would show me around the community. I'd never been to the community before. And then we would do evening service. Sounded good. So I was like, yeah, good. So I ate. Don't remember what I ate. Of course, this was, 1996. This is almost 30 years ago. Wow. But what I do remember is that eventually I was introduced to the young lady's husband. And he was a tall, trapped-in, good-looking fellow with a booming voice. And eventually I learned that he was a preacher and he worked in the hotel industry and many other things. So he said to me, oh, this brother here, this musician that you were introduced to earlier, the Lord told me that he's going to be your husband. Oh, listen. Husband was the furthest thing from my mind. Relationship was the furthest thing from my mind. Everything that was in that whole context was the furthest thing from my mind. But alas, the 7th of December, 1996, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we were wed. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm going to be the first one out of the block to say this. I got married for the wrong reasons. That's number one. Number two, I made assumptions that my then husband never committed to. Assumptions. So this is not about a blame game. This has taken me years of introspection, and now I can speak on it with authority. So, why did I leave my marriage? First thing, the person I married because there was a thing in the church, and there still is, of remaining celibate, pure, untouched. And my assumption, because I can only assume, is that this gentleman needed to get I'm trying to find a nice way to say it. Yes, he needed to get laid. Okay, fine, I said it. But you know what? That's just a temporary fix. And if you use marriage to fix your sexual desires, then you are left with a lifetime commitment that you are not committed to. So, jumping further, faster, the marriage from the first week after the honeymoon. As a matter of fact, leading up to the marriage and after honeymoon, faced me, or I was faced with something I'd never been faced with before. I didn't know it existed. It was a man without money. I'm always trying to find nice ways to say this thing. What that means is there's a difference with a man who is trying to get his thing together. And I remember I asked the gentleman to see his bank book. I was an open book, you know. I was a saver. When I got married, I had at least 6 months income saved. I had savings in different currencies because I'm a traveler. I've always been from I was a teenager, and I believe that I must always be ready. I pretty much, as a translator, salesperson for the resorts, always had a suitcase halfway packed, always had access to foreign exchange, and always was ready to move at a moment's notice. I wanted to be, and I became that person where you could give me 2 days' notice and hand me my plane ticket, and I'm ready. So I got married, and I discovered that this gentleman did not have a stitch of savings, meaning he had zero plus naught money saved in the bank. He also had zero plus naught money in his bank book. Oh, I just said bank book, in his wallet. He had no money. I mean, he had no money. And you might say, but girl, didn't you figure that out earlier? And this is retrospection. We never did the conventional dates. I lived and worked tourism. I had the best of life in tourism. I had lived and I had gone to some of the nicest places. I've slept in some of the best beds. I have hung out with persons of all kinds of ilk, socio-economically. And so when the dating aspect of the courtship should have taken place, it basically just surrounded going to church and everything church related. I didn't have a problem with that because that was kind of new to me and I enjoyed it. I really, really did. But fast forward, you get into a marriage, you're settling down, you know, you believe, and this was my dream, and all of these things were on me. The gentleman never committed to all of these things, but I just assumed that we would go out every now and again. I assumed we'd go take walks every now and again. I assumed that he would be building the financial future that we discussed. At that time, I was qualifying to purchase a house on the scheme that is in place for Jamaicans who are employed. And he, being in construction, said, no, 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 no. Do not purchase a house. Let us build one. Let us get some land and we build a house, because these scheme houses, they're not properly built, and he has worked on many, and all the flaws they have to fix as tradesmen and all of these things. I lovingly listened and believed him. And so the first wrong move I did was to cancel my process of acquiring a home through the scheme that was established for employed individuals. Now, mark you, this gentleman was self employed and he would scoff at my little wages, telling me that, oh, as a tradesman, he can earn mountains and mountains and mountains of money, much, much more than I was earning. But he couldn't get a job. So this is where the story really gets good. So Here comes the 6 month mark of the marriage. She had already moved into my apartment. Red flag number one. Ladies, do not move a man from his mother's house into your apartment. A man who has never lived on his own, who has never paid rent, who has never had to take care of the obligations that come with life. Don't do it. I did it. Not wise. So, he had already moved into the marriage. He had moved into the marriage indeed. He moved into the house. That's where we started our journey. By the way, the honeymoon was intended to be a shared expense, which I paid for in full with my credit card. That story is for another day. We had a wonderful honeymoon, of course. Yeah. And the charge, which should have been shared, to this day, he has not paid me back his portion. Okay? Right. So we left the wedding and we went straight to the honeymoon venue. Never got a cent towards the honeymoon as was committed. 6 months into the marriage, I was bearing the brunt of the expenses because he couldn't get a job. But he was a very convincing person. So he told me, listen, us tradesmen, we don't necessarily work every day. But when we get a good job, the payout is so good. Hundreds of thousands of Jamaican dollars. So you just hold the fort, you just believe. Where's your faith? I'm going to get this good job with this great payout and we'll be fine. Of course, I'm sinking in debt. I am using up my emergency fund because I had at this point left the job in the hotel industry. The hours were too long. My body was tired. My mind was all over the place. I just needed a break. So I went into my first teaching job at a high school teaching Spanish. Y'all know I speak Spanish. You all know that I went to Spain as a student exchange person, and I developed fluency in the language and all of that good stuff. So I taught Spanish as a substitute teacher for Cuban. Oh, that's a story. That's a story in itself. Oh my God, I could tell that story. And so while she was gone on maternity leave, I filled in. And her thing was, she's not coming back to the school. She's not interested in the job, but she wants her maternity leave and her benefits that are paid. And so she asked me, please, 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 just take my job. Do not tell them that I'm not coming back. And not until I tell you, you should tell them you're sliding into my position. So I was like, okay, it's a temporary job, but it's going to become permanent. And I'm putting out my all. I'm getting good results. My students are learning. The principal is happy because it's the first time they have a teacher who both speaks Spanish, speaks English, knows how to deliver, and the children are learning, and everybody is happy. Now, I was offered an English teaching position because the principal discovered that I had an amazing command of English. I was a literary person. I had done oratorical competitions. So I'm also a trained speaker. And she wanted to keep me on the team. But of course, I declined the position because I knew I was going to accept another position, the one I'm currently in as a Spanish teacher. As soon as my friend told me, okay, I'm not coming back for the job, it's yours. Woo! Lo and behold, 2 weeks before the expected date, she turns up to the school and everybody's welcoming her back in time for the start of the end of her maternity leave. And I'm like, what? So I got a moment with her quietly and I said, what's going on? What are you doing here? I thought you were going to let me know when to tell them, I am taking over your position. She's like, no, Charo. That's what the Spanish speakers call me because they can't say Sharon. That's my official given name. Charo, you and I never had that conversation. What are you talking about? No, estoy loca de decir yo. I could never tell you that. I would be crazy. And of course, that was one of the many, 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 many painful blows. It was like someone had doubled their fist and landed it in my stomach. And so, wounded, broken, I went back to the principal and I said, Princey, you know, I love this school so much. You guys have been amazing. I am so happy here. I would be elated to take up the position teaching English. And the principal said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I could not delay because it's a clear vacancy. I advertised the position and it's already filled. Oh my God, another fist was doubled and landed into the softest part of my abdomen. Of course, this is all figurative speech. Nobody physically hurt me. And that April, no, that February was February. I was told adios, adeo, goodbye. Thanks for a wonderful job. It was great having you, Senora. We hope you will be available again in the future if we should ever need you. And I went home to an unemployed husband. And I was now officially unemployed. Yeah, oh my gosh, this is going 30 minutes. And I must be honest, if I'm going to be recapping 24 years of marriage and the situations that led up to it, I guess I can't do it in such a short video. So this is where I am going to leave it. Let's call it part 1, shall we? So part 1 ends at the point where I now go home, rent is due, husband has not worked since we got married in December, and this is the end of February going into March. And my savings are now going to be under attack. Attack meaning I'm going to have to start spending from my savings, and life as I knew it would never be the same. I hope you'll join me again so we can continue the conversation that led to me deciding it's time to leave this marriage.